Just hours after signing the bipartisan infrastructure bill into law, President Biden is expected to take a firm tone during a meeting with China's Xi Jinping. The U.S. and Chinese leaders are scheduled to speak virtually tonight. A senior Biden administration official says some of the goals of this meeting are keeping lines of communication open and, quote, enforcing the rules of the road. For more on what to expect from tonight's summit, let's bring in Isaac Stone-Fish. He's a CBSN contributor and the founder of Strategy Risks, a firm that helps companies manage political and other risks when dealing specifically with China. Isaac, it's good to see you. That senior administration official also says that President Biden will be, quote, direct and candid about areas of concern. Those include human rights, Taiwan, economic coercion, and cyber technology. That's a lot to cover. What is President Biden hoping to do by taking this kind of tone? And more importantly, Isaac, is this kind of tone different than any other tone that any other president has taken with China's leaders? Hey, ease up on Taiwan, ease up on copyright and, cyber technology. These are the things that we've heard over and over and over, since Mao sat in that chair. What's different this time around?
You make a good point, Vlad. What's different this time around is that Beijing and the Chinese Communist Party are a lot more powerful than they've ever been in relationship to the United States. And the US presumably has less leverage to use against China than they have in the past. And there's a lot of people in this field who are frustrated by the actions of previous presidents for not standing up stronger to China. And so we find ourselves in this situation where China under the Chinese Communist Party is very much a peer, and that while we still have a more powerful military, while we still arguably have a more powerful economy, we have much less leverage than we used to. And so taking a firm tone, speaking candidly, isn't as effective as it would have been in the past.
And, it's not just the two countries, but also the two men. Earlier today, Vlad and I were talking about, the president and his infrastructure bill, but also that is, poll numbers are pretty low. Meantime, you have Xi Jinping, who's coming, out of this gathering of the Communist Party, the plenum, and they've definitely sort of reinforced their support for him. And you sort of got the sense that if he wanted to be president for life, he could probably do it as long as he'd like. So now we're hearing the Chinese state media reporting that there's a bit of tough talk from Chairman Xi Jinping, that he will, at the meeting, tell President Biden to, quote, step back on the issue of Taiwan, which is a delicate one. What exactly does that mean?
What it means is that Chinese Chairman Xi Jinping is trying to figure out how much the United States will act to defend Taiwan. They really want to understand what the red line is. If Beijing seizes some islands in the Taiwan Strait near Taiwan, will that provoke a U.S. military response? If Beijing commits a major cyber attack against Taiwan, will that get a U.S. response? And Beijing for decades has said Taiwan is part of Chinese territory. Most Taiwanese people disagree. The US disagrees, though doesn't usually say it that way. And really what Biden needs to do is he needs to make it clear to Xi that the US will defend Taiwan militarily without doing so in such a way that provokes Chairman Xi to actually make true on his promise and seize Taiwan by force if necessary.
But the president is also expected to talk to Chairman Xi, Isaac, about areas of, quote, political or potential alignment. So what are some of those areas?
The easiest one is on climate change. Both the United States and China have very, very strong incentives to fight climate change. There's been some disagreement. John Kerry, the climate czar, feels like that should incite cooperation in other areas. And it seems like Biden, as well as Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, want to keep climate change hived off and want to push Beijing, but not yield on Beijing on climate change. North Korea could be an area of mutual concern. Both the United States and China don't want North Korea to blow up, don't want North Korea to be even more of a failed state. Possibly issues on Iran, but frankly, there are more areas of potential confrontation and conflict than there are areas of cooperation. So I think climate change is going to get a big chunk of the cooperation conversation. And I think the rest of it's probably going to be more adversarial.
So earlier today, Ed O'Keefe said don't expect any deliverables from this. And in fact, those who have organized this meeting don't have that as sort of part of their plan. Is the point of the meeting just to maybe get another meeting in the future? What is the goal here?
It's been very odd. So Chairman Xi has not left China in roughly 22 months now. And these meetings are much better when you do them in person. It's much easier to make an agreement. I mean, I think we've all been through that with the difference between going and having coffee with someone versus talking to them over Zoom. But I think what they're trying to do is both check the other side's temperature and potentially lower it. It's certainly possible that Xi does want to make a deal on something, and in exchange for, say, Biden agreeing to go to the Olympics in Beijing in February, or Biden agreeing to drastically reduce tariffs, Xi will offer something that would make it worth Biden's while to do that. We expect Xi to feel very, very confident coming at the end of this major meeting that helped him further consolidate power. One thing to look for on the other side, if anything else blows up in China at this time, figuratively speaking, of course, that could be a sign that there are rivals or enemies at the top of the party who are trying to detract from what Xi is trying to do with Biden. That could mean there's a bit more of a power struggle going on at the top than we expect. Unlikely, but something else to watch for as the news opens up on the next day or two.
So to your point about tariffs, we've learned that supply chain issues and tariffs are likely not to come up during the call. So given how much business China does with the United States, is that surprising?
I think it is surprising. I think it's certainly possible that the Biden administration doesn't want to bring it up, that they don't feel like they're willing to negotiate on it. But if Xi offers enough of something in return, I'm sure it can be on the table. And both sides have been debating for weeks, what's on the agenda, what are people going to say, what are they going to say? But then when Biden and Xi are there, they certainly can freelance, and they certainly can say, well, I have this point, this is something that I would like to see from you. And then perhaps some sort of deal will be made. I don't think either sides are optimistic about that, but it is possible that we wake up tomorrow morning and read of some sort of bargain, even much less likely potential, but even possibly some grand bargain on some of these big trade issues.
Isaac, you just threw out something that seems sort of minor, but one of the things I find fascinating about these sort of talks is how things that seem minor on the surface carry so much weight. And you talked about Xi Jinping inviting the president to the Olympics. And I listened to a former UN ambassador talk about this, that this invitation actually has the possibility of being sort of a lose-lose situation almost for the president, because there are so many messages that will be sent if he chooses to accept the invitation or reject it. Can you just talk about how accepting an invitation to the Olympics, which seems sort of minor, could be a bigger deal?
He would get shellacked from many members of Congress, mostly on the Republican side, but also on the Democratic side, for going and supporting Beijing's human rights abuses, what's going on in the northwest region of Xinjiang, where upwards of 1 million Muslims are in concentration camps, and also the idea of being more of a supplicant to China, where, okay, well, Chairman Xi won't deign to visit the United States or leave China, but Biden is going and paying tribute to Xi. So I think there's a lot of negative optics that could come out of that. At the same time, rejecting the invitation is, clearly offensive, and there is a strong tradition of who's ever hosting the Olympics to get a pretty good representation of world leaders, especially those that one has at least a somewhat warm relationship with. And Biden has said over the years that he knows Xi better than any other world leader, and they've spent a lot of time together when they were both vice presidents. So it's a difficult thing. And, it's something that Xi could see as offensive if it does get rejected. So it's a difficult line for him to walk. And we also won't know if he does say yes, what the U.S. got in return. So it's a challenging one. It's a challenging one to weigh.
Interesting stuff. Isaac Stonefish, thank you very much.